Welcome to today's video. In this one, we're going to be talking about my 10 essential tips for capturing incredible iPhone content. I get a ton of questions about how I actually go about capturing my Instagram Reels, and we're going to be covering all of that, plus a little bit about photo, and of course, how to get that more cinematic look with your iPhone footage. So with that, let's jump on into it. All right, so it's currently 6 a.m. We've been hiking for the last 2 days. We've had no coffee, but I'm still very excited to get this video out because we're in Quebec City right now. I've got the Frontenac behind me, and we're gonna get some very cool B-roll footage of that building to help explain what we're actually gonna shoot in today's video. But before we can actually dive into what we're gonna do with the iPhone, we need to make sure that our camera settings are perfect. And you're gonna hear a whole bunch of different advice on Instagram on how your camera settings need to look and whatever. I'm just gonna give you the best practices to ensure that you can upload high quality footage for Instagram, plus make your footage look the best. So first thing you're gonna wanna do is to open up the settings app on your phone. You're gonna wanna switch your iPhone to the most compatible mode, not high efficiency, so that you're actually recording in an MOV file format. This way, it makes compression that much simpler for social media platforms like Instagram to actually do, because it automatically takes 4K footage and brings it down to 1080p anyway, so there's gonna be some quality loss regardless, and we just wanna make sure we're minimizing that as much as possible. The next thing that you're gonna wanna do is to actually turn off your HDR mode. You're gonna wanna eliminate any camera styles that are actually added, so if you have extra filters and effects applied in camera, don't use those. You don't want to shoot in cinematic mode most generally. That's not because it looks bad on social media, but that's because it's a little bit wonky to use still. And sometimes if you're in a very complicated lighting environment and you're using cinematic mode on top of that, the file formats are going to be ginormous. And again, when social media platforms compress those files, it's just going to make it look like very, very, very chalky. And the final thing that you're going to want to make sure that you do is when you are filming your videos, you want to make sure that most of the time you're filming it in iPhone's native camera app. We're going to talk about third-party apps that we can actually use to level up our videos, but then there will be some other tricks that you can do along the way to make it look that much better. Okay, so tip 2 is now we need to make sure we're dialing in our camera for what we want our footage to actually look like. And there are 2 ways that I recommend anybody films their iPhone content. The first way is by setting your camera settings to 4K 30 FPS. The second way is 4K 60 FPS. And even though the social media platforms take our 4K footage and compress it to 1080, we still want to be filming in 4K. And then I have a workaround for how to make sure that the platforms understand 4K footage as 1080 so that you keep it at the highest quality possible. So why we use 4K 30 FPS versus 60 FPS is because 30 FPS will, no matter what, look the best on Instagram Reels. If you are filming something that is in a well-lit environment like where we're at right now, and maybe you have architecture or a beautiful landscape and there's not a lot of busyness in frame, 30 FPS is usually the way to go. I, however, always like to shoot at 60 FPS. And the reason why is because number 1, it allows me the ability to slow down my footage, which we're gonna talk about in a bit. But more importantly, and this is a bit of a trick, probably 90% of the Instagram Reels that you see from travel content creators or fitness influencers or athletes is actually shot in 60 FPS. And something happens on the iPhone where footage gets a whole lot smoother when you bring it into 60 versus if you were to actually shoot that on a camera. The other thing that I've noticed with 30 FPS is, let's say you're shooting out in the snow, there's a bit of a jitteriness that comes in the iPhone footage itself. And for whatever reason, the 60 FPS is able to smooth all of that out. So it comes out in a higher quality. Now the workaround for all of this is because we're shooting in 4K, when we upload our footage or we put it in a video editor like Final Cut and then export our footage, we wanna make sure that we're exporting at 1080p so that our 4K footage already comes out as 1080p so that when we upload to Instagram, it doesn't think it needs to compress it. And the second thing is on Instagram, if you're uploading your footage directly to the platform, you just wanna make sure that you have that high quality knob turned on so that you're not overly compressing your footage when you don't need to. And of course, this is going to take us to tip number 3. We're going to start filming some things around the Frontenac, and I'll show you what I mean with that 30 FPS versus 60 FPS. Okay, so for tip 3, we're going to talk about the different angles that you can actually use your iPhone within. And this is to make your iPhone footage that much more interesting. These are my go-to sort of placements for where I want to put my camera. So obviously the easiest location that we can put our phones to film something is at eye level, but there are different ways that we can make that footage just a bit more dynamic. Things like low angle shots, top down shots, high angle shots, and adding foreground blur to our videos will make it that much better and cause a lot more interest into what we're actually showing when we upload it to social media. So I'm gonna go ahead and film a bunch of B-roll of the Frontenac with my iPhone at 60, and as the B-roll clips roll by, I'll put what camera angle was used to film that so you can have an idea of how you should be thinking about filming when you head out with your phone. Okay, so those were the basic camera angles that you can try, but if you notice, a lot of those static ones are really boring. Even though we might have a cool angle like we had with the statue where we placed the phone all the way onto the ground, there's really not much going on. And the way that you want to level up your iPhone footage is by introducing movement into what you're capturing. And there are a whole bunch of different ways you can do that. From panning shots to tracking shots to stabilized push-throughs, whole bunch of ways that we can just add that nice little extra dynamism to our footage and capture the viewer's attention. The last thing we want to have is shaky footage, and my #1 recommendation when it comes to your iPhone is investing in a phone gimbal. All right, so this is the DJI Osmo 6. It is probably my favorite tool I've actually bought for camera accessories. Unlike a regular gimbal, like there's no setup process. You simply just clip it onto the brackets here. When you go ahead and you just turn the gimbal on, it automatically balances your phone right there. And really what this allows you to do is to move your phone around and not have to worry about any camera shake or little micro jitters that come from having handheld footage. So we're gonna go ahead and make a couple of sequences with this so you can really see just how good it works at stabilizing your phone, and then move on to the next tips. All right, so tip #6 is to really take advantage of that 60 frames per second footage and make sure that you're either slowing it down or speed ramping. I'm gonna put up some clips that we've taken throughout the day of slowed down footage and what it looks like versus regular footage, just to show you the effect that it can have. And this is something that's really unique because most people are filming their iPhone footage in 24 frames or 30. And so the difference that I really wanna mention about the 30 frames per second and the 60 frames per second, then 30 frames per second is better when you know you're only gonna be using 30 frames per second. Unless you have an intention to actually slow down your footage, there's really no point in shooting 60 frames unless you're really wanting to be that person that wants that smoother, buttery footage for their Instagram reels. Otherwise, 30 is always the way to go. There's just so many different advantages from the way that it looks to also having a lower shutter speed generally than your 60 frames and introducing less noise in your image. So the picture quality overall to those 30 frames is actually going to be significantly better than 60 most of the time when you really don't know how to fiddle with your camera settings to get the most out of your phone. So tip #7 then actually isn't related to the video quality of our phones, but it actually comes down to audio. And I want to talk about microphones just for a second, because once I invested in external mics to start capturing my iPhone footage with, it made my TikToks and Instagram reels just that much better. And especially if you're looking to do some talking head or capture your travel videos and add a little bit of voiceovers, the mics that I want to show you right now are 100% the way to go. All right, so these are the DJI mics, and if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I've talked about these actually quite a bit. They're really easy to set up. What's really cool about them is when you actually plug them into your phone, the phone stays balanced on the gimbal. It doesn't like shut off completely. If you use a mic that's not matched with DJI's, unfortunately the mic is just too heavy and it'll just tip and not actually work. But DJI made these work with the gimbal specifically because it just made it that much better to actually have the gimbal with the microphone so you can just run and gun and filmmaker. So what we're gonna do is plug them in, and we're gonna film this next clip on the iPhone using the DJI mics just to show you the quality difference and how it actually works out. All right, so we've now got the DJI mics plugged into the iPhone and it's sitting on the Osmo gimbal. And honestly, when I discovered that the DJI mics actually balance on the Osmo gimbal, it was such a huge hack because now I was able to film videos on the fly, maybe do talking head components for TikToks. It just made things so much easier. And so if you're really looking to level up your iPhone content, audio is one of the best ways to be able to do that. So highly recommend you give these little portable mics a shot and see what you think for yourself. Tip number 8 is about photos and how I like to set up my camera to capture the highest quality iPhone photos possible. Because content now on social media involves both video and photo, it's important to cover both aspects. And a lot of the compositional tips that are provided in video actually translate over to photos. The first thing that you want to do to get the most out of your iPhone is to actually set your camera to RAW and to make sure that you're turning off live mode. Yes, live mode has a whole bunch of creative features, from long exposure options and more dynamic elements you can add, but RAW photos is going to give you the most flexibility with the pixels that your 48 megapixel camera, if you have an iPhone 14 Pro, can provide you. This way you can edit it and get the most out of how you want to change the colors and lighting conditions in your photography specifically. So I want to cover just how you can get the compositional tips that we talked about in video with your photos with a few examples before we carry on for the rest of the video. So if we come on over here, I have one shot lined up here perfectly with the Frontenac that I want to show you right now. So when I open up my camera app on my iPhone, I have my RAW mode turned on to the top, and all I'm going to do here is use that foreground technique where we add something interesting into the foreground, like a visual element like here with the railings, to guide our viewer's eye through to our photos. So the railings here point up to the Frontenac. And all I'm gonna do is put my phone just in position to grab the shot. So we'll put that up on the screen, and all this is doing is creating a leading line element guiding up to the Frontenac in order to bring the viewer's attention through to the photo and create more visual interest. The other thing we'll go ahead and do is show you what a top-down shot looks like. So we're gonna hop on up to the bridge, take a photo down of the road, and then carry on down into the old city to cover a little bit more about this. All right, so we've made it down to the old part of the city, and what I wanna do is capture a few photos along the way to help illustrate some of the concepts. So we're just gonna put up some of the frames that we're able to get around this area because it is still raining, and I'm really just concerned about the audio equipment on the camera. But things like adding things to your foreground, utilizing leading lines are both very important elements when you're capturing photos with your phone. The phone has a very hard time capturing depth. Even if you put the phone in portrait mode, it's gonna add that artificial bokeh or depth of field behind your subject. But without that element that actually naturally creates a sense of depth, it just looks a little too digital and overly sharp. So adding things like I did with flowers, or maybe taking advantage of the railing with the staircase behind me, are very important pieces to help level up what your phone photos and videos will actually look like. Okay, and tip number 9 now is about post-processing and what you end up doing with your iPhone footage to get the most out of it when you actually want to share it. The crazy thing about social media now is that each social media platform is trying to reward you for posting on it. And it's been publicly stated that when you actually upload your footage natively to Instagram, as an example, and edit it within the app, there is a small boost algorithmically to how well that content is actually going to perform. That said, I actually upload all of my videos to Final Cut first, and that is why I said at the beginning of the video that when you upload your 4K footage, you need to export it at 1080 and then bring it into your social media platform of choice to get the highest quality out of it. So really, a lot of this is very complicated because you're constantly juggling what the platforms want you to do in order for them to get the most reach and views from your content, and what's gonna make your phone content look best. So the tips I gave you in today's video, you're really gonna have to play around with given what you're using your footage for. Inevitably though, my number one advice is that if you can take your 4K footage and upload it to a social media platform and not have significant loss of quality, which is just gonna come down to how big the files are that you're actually uploading, you're gonna be better off for it. Because that will take me to our last tip. And that's to take your footage and think about ways to really level up what trends and effects that you're applying to your footage that the platforms will reward you for. Instagram's just rolled out this new template feature. So when you bring your footage into a templated trend on the platform, you're gonna be rewarded for that because it's yours and you're gonna get expanded reach. All of this comes together though when it all looks the best, because if your footage doesn't look good, then your trends aren't gonna perform regardless and nobody's gonna use your templates. So really just playing around with the features that the platforms give you and figuring out what works best given our first 8 tips to maximize the quality of your overall phone content. So with that, we're gonna wrap up today's video here. We're probably gonna spend a little bit more time in Quebec City exploring, taking photos, and getting more content. If you did find this video useful, be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think. And as always, I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.